Drenched in the humid spring air, I explored Tainan's historic landmarks, wondering what hidden gems this trip might uncover. It's a solo trip, and if you've never taken a solo trip, do it. Mine is not necessarily a trip to find myself, it's a trip to find creative ideas. There's a lot of common points between finding myself and finding creative ideas. One thing I noticed is that we both have zero idea what we're looking for. As I wandered the tourist sites, I realized that the answers I sought wouldn't be found in the expected places. The creativity I craved seemed elusive, just as it had been for the early settlers of this humid island. I already found myself a couple years back, and I ended up becoming Christian. What the heck is visiting all these temples and castles going to do for finding myself or creative ideas? Absolutely fucking nothing. It's just a scam for the government to get 70 Taiwan dollars out of you and for you to waste time taking photos and videos for your Instagram stories. Or for this YouTube video you're watching now. I paid $2 to come see a flat bed of grass and a bunch of construction work. I think it's supposed to be a fountain here that's not working. I suppose that's a frustration of it all, to try to find an answer to what you're looking for, but the problem is, you don't even know what questions to ask. I don't think I'm the only one. As much as school and governments try to assure us of stability, we live in a world of volatility. As I look at old photos at the treehouse, I like to imagine how early settlers yearned for stability. But all they had was volatility. All they had was this humid-ass piece of land called Taiwan, where they had to find creativity to survive. And if they didn't, it's game over. It's only until this point, as I'm reflecting back home, that I realized that the best places to go while traveling is where the locals are. On the bus, at dinner, coming back from school or work, or even before going to work. Confucius Temple? Complete waste of time unless you like history, which you had no interest about until you got to Taiwan. At least that's how it was for me. Absolutely zero for any inspiring ideas. If you're in Dananmun and you like kids, not in a strange way, but in a creepy way, you can always look over the school from the castle walls of the gate. Now, being an absolute a-hole that I am, I started comparing these Taiwan kids to those back home in America. Most of them are skinny and fit, and are outside doing exercises despite it being 32 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. If it was in the USA, Chubby would already be screaming to go back inside for an ice cream. While I did not get anything in terms of creativity, I did get a sense of how the East is way more disciplined and focused than us in the West. That's the sense I got. What the heck am I gonna do with that sense? Probably nothing. Two roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. Robert Frost. Tainan, a city in southern Taiwan, the oldest city for which it was the capital for over 200 years, not only for the Taiwanese, but also for the Dutch. It is here where I found that the ambitions of the Chinese hero Koxinga parallels the old heroes of Western civilization. Today's goal involved braving the humid May heatwave in Tainan to visit Anping Fort, the most important leverage point that Koxinga captured that turned the tides for the Chinese against the Dutch in their struggle for control of Taiwan back in the 1600s. Believe it or not, the Dutch actually came to Taiwan first, and they got kicked out by the Chinese. So who is Koxinga? Well, Koxinga is originally from China, and he was a loyalist to the Ming Dynasty. So the Ming Dynasty is the dynasty that ruled China from, I believe, 1300s to 1600s. And then a variety of factors like famine and power struggles eventually caused them to crumble. So Koxinga was heavily loyal to that dynasty, and that dynasty was basically conquered by the Qing dynasty. Now, this guy is who you want to be as a friend because he's got your back, right? So Koxinga, he was not only like a land general with a command of a big army, he was also commanding like the Taiwan Strait, right? So he also had control of the oceans.
So what happened is he came over to Taiwan, kicked out the Dutch over here, and made this place, the fort, the home base. So he was basically a pirate that established his own kingdom, and that's what gave the Chinese so much pride, right? That they kicked out these white people, and they made the white people home their own homes. Look at these cannons. So I think these cannons, I think there were a lot more of them. But what happened was when the Japanese took over, they actually sold a bunch of them. But back to the story. So Koshinga, national hero, made this place his own crib. He was planning on using this as a base in order to get revenge on the Qing dynasty and get the house back for the Ming dynasty, who he was loyal to. But lo and behold, actually, when it came to the Qing dynasty, they actually lasted. They lasted from when they took power in the 1600s to 1912. That is basically the last dynasty before the Republic of China, which I don't know much history about, but you can basically think of it as modern China with the CCP and all that stuff. So that gives us pretty much a run up to what happened from 1300s, to now. 300 years of Ming dynasty. There's one special guy that decides to fight for the dynasty that he's loyal to, ran off, made his own kingdom, and tried to think of using that kingdom as a way to get back China, but didn't happen that way. And this is the guy while we're here. So that's Koshinga. Like many of the generals, kind of chubby, huh?
As the days rolled by in Taiwan, I've come to learn something about the Taiwanese. Growing up in the West, what I came to believe about Chinese people was that they play it safe. Heck, my mom continuously preached to me that I should get a government job or become a teacher or a manager because those jobs are stable and you can't get fired. And I think to a point, many Asians do get brainwashed and work hard for dreams placed on them, dreams that aren't necessarily their own. Don't do anything risky like start a business or waste time doing a side hustle. You need to do the sure thing. I like to think those of us who grew up in traditional Asian households have heard something similar at least once. But from the history lesson of Koshinga, that's exactly the opposite of what I grew up hearing. For fuck's sakes, the guy got kicked out of China, took over Taiwan, and used it as a base to try to retake China until his death. If that isn't risk-taking, if that isn't entrepreneurship, I don't know what is. And despite seeing many people going to their jobs in the morning, I'm amazed to see how many more people were doing side hustles like Uber Eats during my time here. So while we're on the topic of side hustles, my mom, as long as I can remember, she was not a fan of starting her own thing, even though she was married to an entrepreneur. She wanted my brother and I to get government jobs that were safe, that you can't get fired from. Well, lo and behold, you can get fired from anything. But while I was in Taiwan, looking at all of the people that were doing side hustles, there's two things that I noticed that I thought I could do as a side hustle. One, the problem I saw was that skincare was a real big thing. I mean, most of the women in Taiwan had really glowing skin. And I want to say that for the men too, but the fact is that men don't really care about skincare as much. So we had a range of teens to like almost seniors that had really bad skin, but there were also guys with some really good skin. So I couldn't wait to come back and build this site, which is TFUEL. And basically, if you have any sort of skin issues, just, upload a selfie and get a skin analysis. It's completely free, and I'm just testing this to see where this will go. And what you'll get in your email is basically your analysis of what you can do to treat your problem. You can see here they ask you to use salicylic acid and a moisturizer, and this is just something that I felt could also help me, because growing up in high school I had really bad acne. So if you want to get a free skincare analysis, then just go to pfuel.com, give it a try, and let me know how it goes. There is one reason your traditional Asian parent wouldn't want you to be an entrepreneur: scaling. When I arrived to the last city of my trip, Kaohsiung, first of all, it was hot AF. Do not backpack in Taiwan from May to August is what I'd say. It's just humid and sweaty. On the first night, after checking into Ahiruya, we popped over to the Nanhua night market. It's astounding to me that in many cases, small businesses hasn't changed for millennia. I imagine that thousands of years ago, the ancestors of these small little storefront businesses were in more or less the same place, selling more or less the same thing. Nanhua night market was pretty much dead by 9 p.m. And the business that got my money was Family Mart. The one thing that Family Mart and 7-Eleven did great at was scaling. When I go through my credit card transactions in Taiwan, it was mainly those two businesses. Even though I wanted to help small business. Why? They were convenient and sold food that was pretty good quality as compared to their US counterparts, and I know what I'm going to expect. It takes away the need to go read Google reviews. Unlike food stalls or restaurants, I know whether or not I'm going to go home with explosive diarrhea. At the end of the night in Kaohsiung, I stumbled upon the more active Raohei night market. I walked through the entire market first, from start to finish, which took 20 minutes, and ended up buying a pork pepper bun and some incredibly spicy noodles to which I didn't expect. I can handle spicy, but this is next level.
Everybody's getting the medium spicy. It is spicy.
少一点。没有要吃什么吗？我在六夜市，我旁边有一摊新的地瓜球，你要吃吗？你都没有要吃东西吗？你想？想一下。
小辣啦。
Here's the thing about why traditional Asian parents would never want their kids to be entrepreneurs. Each of these food stalls are ran by an entrepreneur. Each of them are working back-breaking labor every night, only to make enough to feed their own kids. Walking through the market, there were like 20 stalls selling grilled meat. It's like nobody understood a thing about competitive advantage and differentiation. What made you different from your competitor? One can imagine that the chances of failure are much higher than success, and any kid watching their parents slave away like that day in and day out would much rather insist their own kids do anything other than be an entrepreneur. But one thing that kid will miss is creativity. How creative does one have to be to open a food stall selling grilled meat on a stick? I imagine not much. But it is that creativity, I think, that ensures we are always fed, that we survive, and that we thrive. It is that creativity that scaled Family Mart and 7-Eleven into conglomerates that kept me coming back. Maybe the one thing we have to do is study our early ancestors, the first generation, those yahoos that left their comfy home to strand themselves on a human-ass Taiwan depended on creativity to scale in order to live another day. No sane person would do that. But I guess that's what being creative means, being a little bit insane. It was only then as I reflected back home that I understood the true lesson of my trip. Creativity isn't about playing it safe. It's about taking risks, like the Chinese hero Koxinga who fought to reclaim Taiwan. And as I saw the entrepreneurs hustling at the night markets, I realized that the ambition and ingenuity of these Taiwanese people was anything but a failure. It was creativity. The same creativity, regardless of how big or small, that our ancestors used to keep the lineage alive long enough for you and I to be born.